Okay, so here we are in Module 1. Sorry for the delay. We had some technical difficulties getting this podcast here, but here it is. So this is pretty much how it's going to work for each module. I will introduce you just to the chapter, the concepts that we're going to be covering, and then a basic kind of to-do list. Again, I just want to reiterate, I know I've said this a few times in the intro podcast, but this moves really fast through the chapters. These winter classes are very quick, and there's a lot of material to take in within that time. So as you'll see in Module 1, we're covering chapters 1 and 2. And if you scroll down to here, I'm going to just go ahead and get to these first, and then we'll go back to the to-do list. But here are the chapter objectives for Module 1. We have Chapter 1, which is basically an intro to the field of social psychology. Now, if you've taken an intro to psych class, you probably covered some concepts in social psych. And I say that loosely because depending upon how much time you had in your intro psych class, you may or may not have really covered the field adequately. So social psych encompasses so many different areas. Maybe you covered group dynamics or conformity or prejudice and racism. Those tend to be some of the big ones. But here it's going to give you kind of an overview of how the field started. The branch of social psych, that subfield, as well as some of the research methodology, like how are studies conducted in social psych. Social psychology is an applied area of psychology, meaning it's very applicable to life, different fields, which is why this makes this class so popular. It pretty much applies to any social services, teaching, criminal justice, any of the humanities. So it's a very popular class, but it's important to understand the methodology of how experiments and other methods are conducted in social psych. How do we get to the research behind what propels the field, understanding the theories that are involved, and sort of the underlying elements of social psych is important. So you'll notice as you go through these objectives, you're going to see some of those concepts, contrasting social psych with other sort of common sense approaches to knowledge. A lot of times at first glance, social psych seems like common sense, like, oh, I knew that, why did we need a study to be conducted in order to know that? But then you'll see how, it goes beyond just common sense. And sometimes what we think is common sense or old wives' tales is not really accurate and not right and not true and not what we should be basing our knowledge off of. So we'll be looking at some of that. We'll be looking at some of the major research trends in the field, as well as kind of an introduction to social neuroscience, which is a newer sort of added element to social psych. And I really want you guys understanding in this chapter, just the basic methodology, understanding what correlational studies are versus an experimental study. What kinds of conclusions can we draw based on the type of study that's conducted? What can we say for sure? What do we know? What can we prove? And then as well, the ethics involved in social psychological research. Oftentimes to get to social behavior, our subjects need to be deceived in one way, shape, or form. Otherwise, we don't get true behavior. But when deception is used, what kind of safeguards need to be put in place? What do we need to make sure happens for deception to be used ethically in social psychological research? So you're going to cover some of that and then some of the elements involved in that. And so I should see a lot of these concepts pop up in your discussions for these chapters, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But here's where you're going to want to be integrating a lot of these concepts and things that you're learning into the overall discussion of the material. Now, when we get into Chapter 2, Social Cognition, we start really getting into the meat of social psych. In particular here, it's cognition. So it's how do we think socially? Like how do other people affect our thinking, and how do we think, and how does that affect other people? So it's a kind of a two-way street there. So here we're really getting into a lot of the theory and the concepts behind what drives our social cognition. So we're going to talk about schemas. We're going to talk about self-fulfilling prophecy, and how we use shortcuts or heuristics in our thinking. What does that do for us? Does it benefit us? Does it hurt us? And how does that work? And really get to the nature of our thought processing. And we're going to realize that some of our thought happens very automatically at a sort of subliminal level that we don't really realize that we're doing. And some of our thought process is very controlled. We make careful decisions. We make judgments based on what we know and what we've experienced and what we've heard. And so we're going to kind of pit those together, the automatic processing versus controlled processing, and how that affects our thought. We're going to get into a lot of different types of biases. And one thing I want to just be clear, when a person has a bias, he or she is biased in the past tense. Okay, so we want to make sure we're using that word correctly. I think it's one of the most commonly misused words. Someone holds a bias, B-I-A-S, but when we display that bias towards others, we are said to be biased, B-I-A-S-E-D, okay? And we're going to talk a lot about different biases, negativity bias, optimistic bias, and how these influence our thinking and ultimately our behavior towards others, and what are the consequences of that. Sometimes we hold these biases and they really lead to negative outcomes, maybe that we're aware of or not aware of. And that all goes into sort of our cognition, and it's all affected as well by other aspects of our psyche, like our mood, like our brain behavior, different areas of our brain that are activated when we're upset or when we're angry or when we're not understanding something. You're going to see how our thinking can change just kind of based on our moods. So we're going to get into some of that, and really just looking at other external factors that can affect our thinking, as well as our mood, things that are happening in our environment that could cause our thinking to go astray or go awry, or deviate from sort of what we know versus what we think we know. So we're going to get into a lot of that material there. So let's just go back up really quick. So those are the chapters. Every module, I'm going to give you a to-do list. And you're going to notice in Module 1, there's a lot of extras because this is your first module. You're just getting used to the class. There's a lot to kind of navigate around and check out. So some of this is basic stuff, getting your textbooks, logging into Plato, logging into Revel. Some of this is repetition from the Start Here podcast that I did in the Start Here menu. But do make sure you're taking today to do these things. Today, the bulk of your day should be spent logging into Plato, checking out everything that I've put in here for you, logging into Revel, which is the online access that comes with the textbook, seeing what's there, working out any kinks if you're not able to get access. Revel has 24/7 assistance on the PearsonHigherEd.com website, and you want to go there if you're having any trouble logging into Revel. It's saying that your access code doesn't work or something's wrong. I can't help you with that stuff. You have to contact Pearson, and they have help online all the time. So it's like a live virtual person that can help you work out that stuff. But I'd rather you get that done today, so that you're able to start using those resources right away, because there's videos in there and there's things, practice tests that you want to start using, because your first exam comes Thursday. So really, you've only got a couple days to get through the material and get through everything before that first exam. You want to post your bio to the Student Lounge, and the Student Lounge is located in this Communications tab here. So you want to go there and do that. And I've given you an example of my bio in the Start Here menu. You can check that out if you're looking for an idea of how to go about doing that. You've got the lecture slides, which are right here. Chapter 1 lecture slides, Chapter 2 lecture slides. I actually give you Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 PDF in case you don't have your text today. Hopefully you have it tomorrow, but you can get started on your readings nonetheless. These are the extra readings. So these are the readings that are not included in your textbook, the Branscombe and Barron textbook. These are extra articles that you're reading that are going to get integrated into the discussion for the week. So let's go back up here. So you're going to read those supplementary articles, and then the next thing you would do once you've processed all the information, you've done all the readings, you've read Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, you've read Article 2 and Article 9, which have to do with here ethics and research, and social cognition, particularly looking at the concept of pluralistic ignorance and how it affects our behavior. Once you've read all that, then you're ready to go ahead and dive into the discussion. And the discussion board is where you really should be spending a good deal of your time. These discussions should not be taking you 15 minutes or less. And if that's happening, then you're not doing them correctly. So I just want to say that right up front. These are integrated questions. So, for this module, you have 2 questions. They're based on the extra article readings, but you should be integrating in your textbook readings as well. So in order to answer these questions, you should be diving into those article readings, diving into the chapters, even the videos, and writing out very thoughtful integrated responses where you're pulling in the concepts and citing them in support of what you want to say to answer these questions, and that should be your original post. Once you've posted your original post, you have about a day or so for everyone to get their posts in. Then you're going to want to go back into the discussion, and you're going to want to comment on 3 people's posts. And when I say comment, I really mean a thoughtful response to what someone said, extending the dialogue beyond just, oh, I agree with you, that's really smart what you said, or I like what you said. You need to be extending on, like, oh, in addition, I think this also, and here's why I think it, here's my support, here's what I read, or did you realize that this also has to do with what you said? Some people are going to comment on things that you didn't think to say, and that's great, because that gives you more information, and it's going to prepare you for the test, but it's also going to lead you into a direction where you have an opportunity to extend the dialogue and say a little bit more about comments they made that you didn't. So that's how the discussions work, and I really want you putting a lot into it. Discussions are half your grade, okay? So each post each discussion board posting is 25 points. You're getting 10 points for your original post, and you're getting 5 points for each reply to someone. And again, I just want to reiterate that these posts need to be grammatically correct, spell checked, edited, make sure there's no errors. These are not text messages, so there should be no lowercase i's. These are thoughtful responses, and I grade these. So you want to really take them seriously and edit and proofread your responses before plugging them in. And I say a lot of this in here in how to do a discussion board post. You can click on that and get the rubric for how I'll be grading those. Okay, then lastly is your first exam. Your first exam closes on the 4th. That's Thursday at 11:59 p.m. You'll have 30 minutes to complete it. You cannot use notes or books, so pay attention to that. Be ready and be prepared. You can even use some of the practice exams in Revel to help you prepare for that. The time limit is up for the podcast, so I hope you got everything. please email me if you have questions.